providing the eggs and are being grown and all. So there's lots of protections. A concern for us on this coast of Florida is that we have a lot of live bottom, which means that if you go out and look at the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico on this, particularly in the Eastern Gulf, which is the southwest, off the southwest coast of Florida, there's a lot of life on the bottom. It's not a sterile environment. And so the potential impacts on the bottom from whatever is falling out of the net pans needs to be evaluated before, and there needs to be monitoring to see what those effects are. Ideally, you'd find a place that doesn't have much living on the bottom. The other thing that's of concern is that the currents that would disperse whatever the waste is, and you know the solution to pollution is dilution. So if you have strong currents that are carrying away the waste and dispersing it and diluting it, that's the best situation for this kind of operation. And in this part of the Gulf of Mexico, we don't have very strong currents. So I think it's important to ask about the bottom, you know, what's the life on the bottom, how fast are the currents, those kinds of questions in your testimony, or yeah. Is there something else we talked about that I should emphasize?
Yeah, I mean, there was one thing that you raised in our conversation where, I mean, I think a lot of people would prefer to have additional analysis and studies before this type of project is approved. And one thing that you had mentioned is something that the council, advisors of the council were looking at a project of mapping the region for appropriate spots where these types of projects could or should more likely be located. So what are the other alternatives for to this location, and have they really studied that? Or maybe we should do a more comprehensive study of this type of aquaculture project in our region before we allow a pilot project to go forward.
Yeah, so one of the things we talked about when we were developing the plan was, should we actually create a map that said, these are the areas that would be appropriate based on currents, based on not having a lot of life on the bottom, based on avoiding shipping lanes, based on avoiding where there's a lot of commercial wild fish harvest or important recreational features that draw recreational fishermen. So to create a map and look for the places where it would be most appropriate to have fish farms in different regions of the Gulf of Mexico, but that was not supported in the plan, and so there's a sort of case-by-case evaluation of those features that will go along with this. Now, yeah.
I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. We are running out of time. However, I would like to go over the things that I gathered in research I did on this. And as I said, I have spoken to several different scientists regarding it, one of whom was Larry Brand, and you would have seen Larry here at CONA last June meeting. The research in other countries already shows that in open ocean sites of deep water with good currents, that this one cage definitely would not be considered a significant pollutant just because of the fact that it's one cage and there is adequate space for those nutrients to be diluted. And scale is the thing that I think is really important because, as I mentioned before, if you've got one cage as a pilot program, you can't necessarily extrapolate from that one to an industrial level production. And that's one of my concerns. The other thing is the location on the shelf for Florida. Florida has a continental shelf that goes out 100 miles to the west. Whereas on the East Coast, you don't have that shallow area and you've got more currents. So I also agree that I think that this can be used as a study situation in order to vet a lot of the questions that really need to be asked about aquaculture and whether this would be an advantage or a disadvantage in the United States. The one thing that one of the scientists pointed out to me is that the organism that causes red tide, okay, Brevis, is a living organism. It can swim, and it can swim to and fro, so it can become attracted to this kind of a situation and actually become potentially an incubator for red tide. That's one thing that I think is a very valid concern that should be explored to see whether that's going on. The other thing is the diet. And I think that this is a pilot for a national program regarding this type of industry for the United States. So there are many questions that need to be asked, and I think that there may be much more relevant locations for it other than just here. So we have to keep that in mind. And we need to participate fully in the process. I'm not going to be able to take the questions regarding this topic because we have our main discussion is about to begin, and I want to introduce, I want to first of all thank you very much.
There's one other, briefly, for when you're thinking about this, another thing that Julie and I spoke about was how are they going to maintain it? And there's a big question, is it going to be they're going to go out once a week to check it out, or if there's going to be some presence there more frequently, which would be probably a lot safer if they...
It's my understanding there's going to be a barge there. Yeah, but you know, a lot of questions need to be asked and answered and explored. New ideas about it need to be presented in order for it to be considered. And I really urge you all to participate. Sean Sellers is here.